Okay, ready to go?
All right, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Council for Minnesotans of African Heritage council meeting. We are officially calling the meeting to order. We are going to bypass a couple of items because we do not have, we don't quite have a quorum. So if we can actually jump down to the financial report, and we'll start there, and then we'll move along from there. And I'm going to mute myself so Shakira, if you all, either you or Linda, can go over the financial report.
Did you want me to do roll call quick?
No, because we don't have a quorum and it's only 3 of us here. We'll come back to that.
I'll share my screen in a second.
Okay, thanks. And I'm going to mute myself.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yep, we can.
All right, so as of June, we have $23,742.07 in the unobligated fund. So that's where we stand as of now. We won't know where we've ended for the fiscal year until end of August to early September when everything is officially closed out. We don't have any negative numbers. Yeah, I mean, we did pretty good. This is about 10,000 less than we had last month. So it's good. Any questions?
Oh, because I know we went over this, in the executive meeting. I'm just looking to see, Biff2, I know you are on. I don't know if you have any questions. I don't know if she has her, she's muted. So I'm going to assume that there aren't any questions and we can.
Yeah, I don't have any. So.
Okay. Okay.
This is Beef too. I don't have any questions. Thank you, though.
Okay, no problem. Do you have the capability? It is nice if as council members can have our cameras on. If you have the capabilities, I recognize we're kind of in between people trying to come home from work, for folks that are going back to the office and otherwise, but that would be great if we can. And if we can't, I understand. And I see Yolanda has joined. So is that a quorum or we still need one more?
I believe that is a form.
All right, so I'm going to jump back up to roll call.
Yeah.
And so if you can do roll call, Shakira and or Linda.
Sure, I can do it. Chair Hughes,
Present.
Vice Chair Doe,
Present.
Councilmember Busa,
Present.
Councilmember Lee, Yolanda, are you present?
Did you call me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm present. Thank you.
And Councilmember Nandi. Oh, your volume is something, but I did see you mouth it, Jude.
Yep. All right, awesome. Thank you. So
Yeah,
if we can go to, thank you, Shakira. If we can jump to our meeting agenda. I just need a motion to adopt the meeting agenda. If there aren't any additions or corrections on the agenda.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
And because we are virtual, as you all know, we have to do a roll call vote. And so either vote aye or nay. Shakira, if you can do the roll call, please.
All right, Chair Hughes,
Aye.
Vice Chair Dell,
Aye.
Councilmember Adams Lee,
Aye.
Councilmember Busa,
Aye.
Councilmember Nandi.
Aye.
All right, motion is passed. And we have our consent agenda, so hopefully everybody has had an opportunity to review the minutes. Were there any corrections or additions to the minutes that were not listed? And not hearing any, if I can entertain a motion to accept our consent agenda, which literally is just the approval of the meeting minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And again, you have to do a roll call vote. And after your name is called, it's either aye or nay.
Chair,
Shakira? Aye.
I like that.
Vice Chair Dell,
Aye.
Councilmember Busa,
Aye.
Councilmember Adams Lee,
Aye.
Councilmember Nandi.
Aye.
Okay.
Great, so we have already given the financial report, so we're gonna move on to our special guest. And so we have two. We have Michelle Weber, who is a part of the LCC, as you know, as our Legislative Coordinating Commission. And then we also have Gloria, who is here from Minnesota Department of Transportation. So we're gonna actually start with the Minnesota Department of Transportation and then move to Michelle Weber for our guests. So I am turning the floor over to you, Gloria.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let's see if I can share my screen. Okay, good. You can see it now, I hope.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Gloria Jeff. I am the Livability Director for Metro District of the Minnesota Department of Transportation. I am also the Project Director for Rethinking I-94. The Shakira was a participant in our community leaders meeting, our workshops on livability, and thought that you might find this of interest, in particular because one of the pillars of our livability framework is equity. So what I would propose to do this evening is to provide you with some information on what our livability framework is, the approach that we are taking to introduce livability into the project work that the Minnesota Department of Transportation is doing, and to give you an opportunity to provide us with some thoughts with respect to the topic, any of the framework topics, but in particular, the one associated with equity. Any questions before I get started? This is a lively group this evening, I can tell. All righty. All righty, let's see if we can get started here. I'm hoping that my technology is my friend, and it's not going to be my friend, so we'll do it the straightforward way. Livability is not a new concept, but it's one that's been talked about a lot in transportation. And for the Minnesota Department of Transportation, it's an introduction to our projects in a way that we've not done in the past. When we talk about livability at the Department of Transportation, we're focusing on not just the condition of the roadway or the bridges or of the frequency of transit service or any of the sort of traditional infrastructure elements, but we really want to get into the fact that We built a transportation system in the 20th century. In the 21st century, we really are focusing on how does it serve the needs of the people and what are the impacts associated with provisions or the absence of transportation services. So livability in that context is focusing on the quality, location, and type of transportation facility and services that are available to meet the broader community needs. It's not enough to get you from point A to point B. We really do have to move beyond point A to point B. Our livability collaboration includes not only looking at highway, roads, and streets, but it includes things in the metropolitan area like transit lanes on I-35W. It includes looking at the Dale Street Bridge, which was led by the county of Ramsey, but was very much a part of the Minnesota Department of Transportation's efforts because of the fact that it was over our infrastructure. In addition to those are examples, why is MnDOT involved in the effort? We're involved in it because our own fundamental goals statement calls for us to meet the needs of businesses as well as the residents through transportation. It requires us to move people and the economy. And a lot of time the discussion gets focused on how we move people, whether they're using transit, whether they're in cars that are on congested roadways, whether they are utilizing polluting vehicles. But it is about not just how we move people, but how we move the economy as well. As the source of a $1 billion plus annual budget, it is important that the benefits that are accrued to either contracting or to the access to businesses, employment, cultural and recreational activities becomes important. $1 billion plus a year annual budget is not chump change. We also want to make sure that not only does the Minnesota Department of Transportation get involved, but that our stakeholders are also beneficiaries of the effort, whether those stakeholders are John and Jean, member of the general public, or they are the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, or for that matter, the residents in greater Minnesota as well. And it matters to us in addition to those reasons in that we did some survey work over the last couple of years and found that folks care about more than just highway, roads, and streets, that they are interested in their communities. They want to be involved in our project development work early and not just at the time when we are about to put shovels in the ground. And they want to see their values as a community reflected in our project designs and efforts. So we're going to translate those into a series of livability papers that build upon the pillars of the livability framework. We're going to be utilizing the Rethinking I-94 and to some extent the 252-94 projects in Metro District as our pilots. We're going to be seeking input not only on what MnDOT should do, but also what our fellow stakeholders in government and for that matter, the owners and operators of the various networks within the transportation system. We hope that we will be able to expand upon MnDOT's role, not only as a leader in terms of highway, roads, and streets, but also as a partner and as a facilitator. There are lots of places where MnDOT has no statutory authority, whether it's housing, whether it's the provision of recreational facilities, but we do have the ability to pull together the folks who are involved, particularly in the areas of economic development. And so we want to make sure that we take advantage of that role. We've done since the first of the year a series of 6 workshops, and you can see that we've had a wide view of activities from economic vitality in communities to safety to equity. This effort initially began in looking at the Rethinking I-94 effort, which is a potential series of projects over a 20-year period that will go from downtown Minneapolis to downtown St. Paul. The intent being that while we built that freeway initially in the 1960s to connect the two communities, that in today's environment, there are a variety of neighborhoods, industrial parks, educational facilities, major sporting venues, as well as institutions of higher education along that corridor. And we want to make sure that we not only make safe the roadway, but that we have ways to reconnect those communities, that we have ways to provide the benefits of transportation access to those residents, whether it's how they get to and from the grocery store, or whether or not they are able to get to employment out in the suburban environments, or the ability to attract businesses into their community because of the ease of access. We focused on one workshop in which we looked at safety, and while safety traditionally is thought of as transportation being about reducing the number of fatalities and injuries, in this context, we were also looking at issues around personal safety. How well is the environment lighted? How well are the places where people have to walk or ride in environments where they feel like they can be safe and encouraged to do so? My favorite example is the mom with two toddlers, one in the stroller and one holding her hand. And the one that's holding her hand is probably 2 to 3 years old and goes, aha, there is a ball on the other side of the street. And you want to make sure the sidewalk is wide enough so that when that toddler pulls away from mom, that she has the ability to snatch back the second time before they hit the street. Because at 2 or 3, they don't know that car that the little cars that they play with that look much bigger on the street can do them great bodily harm. It also is intended to make sure that our sidewalks are available so that grandma feels like she can walk down the street to her neighbor's home and do so safely, because there aren't cracks in the sidewalk, there aren't tree trunks that have created tripping hazards, those kinds of things, as well as just what else can we do to make sure that transportation isn't just how they get in their car and go from place to place, but the other kind of day-to-day activities as well. On the Dale Street Bridge, you can see here that we have very narrow sidewalks, lots of traffic, and there was clearly a need to create a safer environment, whether it was for grandma or the mom with the toddler or the bicyclist, or for that matter, just you or I trying to walk across the bridge. Today, 3 years after those top shots were taken, you can see that the bridge has been widened, the sidewalks have been widened, that additional signage has been put on there so that folks know that they're going over the Rondo community. It's all intended to make sure that folks have a sense of place, that they're not just driving through a nowhere land, but that there's a place where people live, work, and thrive. On the equity workshop is the one that I really want to focus on with you folks tonight. We sent out some materials in advance asking folks to talk about what their neighborhoods were doing in terms of equity. What were the values and the strengths of their community, and what were the weaknesses and threats with respect to equity? It may sound very familiar. It was a mini SWOT analysis done at the neighborhood level. Excuse me. MnDOT is in the process of updating its statewide transportation plan, and so we are adopting a definition for equity. And as you can see in the italics and slightly bolded, that we are talking about equity that ensures that the benefits and the burdens of transportation spending, services, and systems are fair, and particularly where they have not historically been fair and have negatively impacted people, especially Black, Indigenous, and people of color, so that they are not just able to be informed about the system, but are empowered to be a part of the decision-making process. And while we recognize that it doesn't encompass all of the aspects of equity, we are at a process where we're thinking about equity as, think of it as a large pizza with multiple slices. The pizza itself is equity, and there are lots of slices that deal with race, ethnicity, gender, differing abilities, your geographies, etc. We can't eat all of that pizza at once, although I have to admit my teenage boys on occasion did try to inhale a single pizza. And they discovered that in spite of their best efforts, they were going to have to take it a slice at a time. And so that's what we're doing here. It doesn't mean that the other aspects of equity are not important. It just means we're going to start with this slice that focuses on people who have historically not been a part of the decision-making process. And so we asked the communities with that definition in mind, what are you doing? What are the strengths, the weaknesses, and the opportunities? And what we heard from them was what they are doing is, for example, in the Rondo community, they are addressing the loss of wealth that resulted from the construction of the freeway. There are multiple residential communities that are focusing not just on the homeowners, but also trying to focus on the renters as well. Because in a market as hot as we have here in the Twin Cities, affordable housing is increasingly difficult, and transportation has a big play in that folks can afford to live in one area, but they have to get jobs in another area because there's a mismatch between where they live and where they work. The values or the strengths that the neighborhood saw was that they want to keep ownership not only of homes, but also of businesses within the context of the community. So folks who own businesses, live in the community, have a stake in its success. There were some communities that described themselves as their strengths or values being their long-term involvement in progressive politics, which means that they felt like they were on the side of the angels and making sure that good things happened. The weaknesses they were equally candid about. They talked about the fact that in this stretch of freeway, that there was a history of racial injustice, whether it was the destruction of the Black Wall Street in Minneapolis along the I-35W, or whether it was in the Rondo community, or whether it was in the elimination of several neighborhoods in what is now downtown Minneapolis. They were candid that folks are more focused on their own personal security than moving society as a whole. And because of that, they are willing to put up with things that are not fair because they're more concerned about what happens to me and mine. And the other two weaknesses that they said was a lack of time and a lack of money. Nothing new to you folks, I'm sure, nothing new to me. We also had the two cities talk about what were they doing. The city of St. Paul talked about the fact that they have created a climate justice advisory committee, and that it will focus on justice around climate change, and that they will focus on low income and historically underrepresented individuals' needs as they move forward with their agenda. And they are also focusing on reducing the number of vehicle miles traveled. The city of Minneapolis is saying that it is important to support a car-free or car-light lifestyle. They've called for the elimination of any highway capacity improvements within their corporate limits. They've adopted a policy with respect to environmental justice, and they've called for the creation of green zones in which there will be affordable housing, there will be jobs that match the skills of the folks in the area, and that they will be sustainable in the long term for future generations. When they talked about public health and the environment, that was an interesting conversation because they recognize that racism is a public health epidemic in the Twin Cities area that must be addressed, that we cannot simply continue as we have in the past to do Minnesota nice and ignore the issue. And so they really want to focus on it. They want to look at how we define benefits and burdens so that groups are able to not just bear the burden of all that traffic going by their front doors, but are also able to reap the benefits associated with the economic development activities associated with transportation. We are looking to continue to do our workshops through the end of the third quarter of this calendar year. That will develop a series of papers and recommendations and present them to the members of the City Council, both Minneapolis and St. Paul, as well as the Hennepin and Ramsey County Board of Commissioners, as well as the Met Council, so that all of them have an opportunity. We hope to develop all of these with groups like yours as an essential part of the effort. Shakira has been in attendance, and we're looking forward to others being involved as well. I have talked for about 10 minutes, which is probably 5 minutes longer than I had hoped to. So questions, comments, jump in, tell me something.
First of all, thank you, Gloria. A lot of good information. I'm more so interested in, you talked about Shakira being a part of this, and I also heard where you kind of primarily focus in on Minneapolis and St. Paul. I'm thinking of one of our council members, Carl Crawford, who's in Duluth. What other things are you all doing outside of what I would classify as the Twin Cities?
Not much at the moment, basically because this is brand new to the Minnesota Department of Transportation. So we're doing a pilot program. We'll expand once we've been able to be successful and do some lessons learned here. Then we'll expand it to statewide. We have visibility with our senior leadership. They're supportive. They're excited about it, but we're starting small. Okay.
Council members, what questions do you have for Gloria thus far?
I have a quick question, and thank you so much, Gloria. My question is, in the process of the SWOT analysis that you did and the collection of surveys that you did, can you say that people of color, people who are disparate impacted, are they actively engaged in this process? And if not, what kind of outreach do you do? Can you just elaborate?
They're actively involved. The livability effort is just one part of the overall initiative. And between 2016 and the end of 2018, the Rethinking I-94 effort went out and talked to anybody and everybody. We showed up at public events. We showed up at neighborhood block parties. We sent out over 2,500 surveys. We had online presence. We did a market segmentation study to make sure we knew who was in the area, what they were concerned about. We produced a document, if you go out to our website, which does a zonal analysis for the populations between Broadway and 94 on the west that extends all the way to Trunk Highway 61 on the east. And in it is an analysis of who lives there, why do they live there, why do they choose to stay there, what is it that they need from transportation. We are actively engaging with community-based organizations to make neighborhood level. We're not talking about just the sort of big national organizations. We are talking about neighborhood level. Our policy advisory committee is composed of elected officials at both the statewide level and at the local level to make absolutely sure that not only do we have neighborhood-based input, but that those who ultimately control the purse strings are engaged and are willing to commit to the recommendations that come out.
Thank you so much. Thank you for elaborating on that.
Okay.
Madam Chair, can I just ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Thanks, Gloria. I appreciate you coming on. Question for you, that policy advisory board, is that the same as the state transportation plans policy committee?
It is not.
Okay, so how does your group fit with that group? I just got put on that group recently, so I was just curious to know if there was any overlap or how that fits together.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of overlap at the staff level, but the critical overlap is both groups are ultimately chaired by the Commissioner of Transportation, Margaret Anderson Kelleher.
Okay.
There is a question in the chat from our council member Crawford. He says, thank you for being here. How can we work as the African Heritage community to cut down the traffic of heavy trucks and harmful emissions in our most congested areas where most of our people live?
An interesting question in that it's one that we've posed increasingly. We saw in the pandemic a significant reduction. Last year, we saw a significant reduction in the amount of traffic on roadways. We saw that with the number of people working from home, that there was what we call a spreading out of the peak period, so the congestion wasn't occurring in those peak periods between 7 and 9 in the morning and 5 to 7 in the evening, but rather spread out over the day. The biggest challenge that we have is the balancing act. The more trucks you have, the better your economy is going. Because believe it or not, there is nothing that you receive in your home where some portion of that trip is not made on a truck. The issue of dealing with the polluting trucks is being handled at the national level. There are significant penalties in place that are being enforced and design changes taking place at the vehicle manufacturers to reduce the amount of pollutants. The biggest challenge that we have is that associated with congestion, and it is how do we get people to not get in their vehicles to make every trip. And that goes back to that safety issue of, do I feel safe to ride my bike? Do I walk? There is no answer that says, here's the silver bullet, do this one thing, and everything is taken care of. It's a balancing act. Because remember, I talked about transportation moves people and it moves the economy.
Yep.
So when you talk about trucks, that's one piece of it. Now, the Livability Initiative is an effort to really focus on what's the impact in the neighborhoods. Do we need to look at lowering speeds? Do we need to look at eliminating truck traffic on certain routes? Those are the kinds of decisions, which is why we are now focusing on how do we engage with members of the general public. We as transportation professionals have our own ideas. And while my lived experiences may be very similar to the populations that you're describing, many of my colleagues don't have that. And so rather than letting their lived experience dictate what happens, we need to focus and are focusing more on what does the neighborhood want? What do their neighborhood-based leaders see as important? What do their what does that constituency see as important? Because it's not, well, just get rid of all the trucks. Well, let's talk about what happens if you get rid of all of the trucks. Is it better to look at, let's talk about how do we change the time of day, the size of the vehicles, and quite candidly, what are the pollution controls that we place on them?
Interesting. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Gloria, for the presentation. My question is pretty simple. For community members and even council members that want to participate in the meetings, how do they apply?
There's no application process. If you go to the website, and did I forget to put it on here? I'll put it in the chat. But the website is, if you simply go to Rethinking I-94, just Google Rethinking I-94, it will take you to the website. At the bottom of the page is livability. We have monthly meetings with community leaders. We have quarterly meetings with the Policy Advisory Committee. They're all open to the public. You just need to sign up and they'll send you the link to the meetings. So there's no application process. And
Thank
I'll
you.
make sure that Shakira has that website address.
Oh, thank you. You also mentioned is it free car or car free something on your presentation? So
What I said was that in a presentation that the city of Minneapolis did, they called for a car-free or car-light environment as their goal.
okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Gloria? Well, Gloria, thank you so much for coming, sharing this information. I'm curious of, once the pilot is done, definitely looking at some of the other areas around the state, what that's going to look like. And an interesting thing that you mentioned about lowering the speed. I live in the western suburbs and they just increased the speed, the speed limit on one of the highways out here. So again, you kind of hear different parts of the state where they're either thinking about decreasing or increasing. And it definitely has an impact depending upon your ethnicity. I will say that. So it definitely.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that the speed limit issue is not a one size fits all.
Right.
My colleagues and I are stepping up to the plate and acknowledging that decisions that got made by highway departments in the 1950s and 60s were specifically focused. I'm new to the Minnesota area. I will acknowledge that I went to the archives to to do some research on how the decision to locate 94 was made. And I was astonished at the things that they put in writing about why they eliminated the Rondo community and why they chose a particular alignment through the city of Minneapolis. And we cannot undo. What we can do is learn from those mistakes and move forward to make sure with the eye that absolutely race and ethnicity and income have to be an explicit part of our decision-making process. And we just got to be able to explain to folks, or don't do it.
Right. Right. Hope you hit it on the head. Well, thank you for spending time with us this evening and sharing this information. And I know there's been a couple links that have been popped into the chat. We'll make sure that, the pertinent information is circulated, so that any of the council members, in addition to, Shakira representing the council, but if others have an interest of participating, we'll make sure that that information is sent out there. So thank you so much.
Not a problem.
We definitely will ask for you to come back once the pilot is over to hear what the outcomes were.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Michelle, you are up.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Weber. I'm the Executive Director of the Legislative Coordinating Commission. And Shakira, I am not having an active share link. So, it just popped up. So let me share my screen with all of you. All right, and I'm hoping that you can see that now, the presentation. I was asked to talk with you a little bit about the Legislative Coordinating Commission, which represents two separate but connected organizations or types of structures. There's the Legislative Coordinating Commission, which is an office, a joint office at the legislature of nonpartisan staff. And then there's also the Legislative Coordinating Commission, which is a group of legislative members that's representative of legislative leadership across both the House and the Senate. The joint offices and commissions that exist then at the Minnesota legislature, there are several independent offices. I mentioned the Legislative Coordinating Commission, and that's the office that I'm the executive director for. And I'll talk a little bit more about our specific role. There's also the Office of the Legislative Auditor, which conducts financial audits as well as program evaluations on programs and services that the legislature funds or executive branch agencies or programs that are offered by the executive branch. There's also the Reviser of Statutes, which is responsible for bill drafting and the publication of our state laws. the Legislative Reference Library, which serves as a resource to members, legislative staff, as well as the public, and has maintains a lot of the historical documentation associated with legislative proceedings, legislative membership, and things of that nature. And then the Legislative Budget Office is relatively new. It was created in 2017 and took over responsibilities for the fiscal note process in September of 2019, and most recently was assigned a new responsibility, which is to review tax expenditures and work with a tax expenditure commission on that review of tax expenditures. There's also a multitude of commissions. Some of the larger commissions that exist that have dedicated staff are the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources. They're known as LCCMR, the Legislative Commission on Pensions and Retirement, and the Lessard-Sams Outdoor Heritage Council. This is a very long list. I won't read it for all of you, but it's a list that's representative of the other commissions that are established in state statute. And the LCC, the office that I work within, has a variety of responsibilities associated with each of these commissions. So for some of them, we staff them and help with logistical arrangements. For some, we have a more in-depth level of work that we do on behalf of the commission. In some cases, there are reports that are written or research that's done. There were some new commissions created during this most recent special session: a cybersecurity commission, a data practices commission, a salvage title task force, there's also a human services background study eligibility task force, and then a frontline workers work group, which is, you probably heard about. There's the legislature indicated that they want to provide $250 million in resources to frontline workers during the pandemic. And the LCC has a responsibility to provide the space and forum for the meetings of that work group, as well as provide any assistance that's requested by the work group. Some commissions and work groups are time limited, and others are standing and ongoing work that the legislature has. In most cases, there's membership from both the House and Senate, and in some cases, there's also appointees similar to your council from the governor's office, or even public members get appointed to some of these commissions that we work with. One that I'll talk a little bit more about, because I will, at the conclusion of my presentation, talk more specifically about how the LCC works with the council and the support that we're here to provide. But there is a subcommittee on ethnic councils that is a subcommittee that was created by the Legislative Coordinating Commission to work with the councils. The coordinating commission then that is representative of leadership and members of the House and Senate. It's authorized under Minnesota Statute Chapter 3.303, and it has it's an overall broad authority to coordinate legislative activities of the Senate and the House of Representatives. It includes 12 members of the legislature. So I mentioned that it's representative of legislative leadership. The president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House serve as the chair and vice chair of the LCC. Currently, Speaker Hortman is the chair, and in 2 years, the gavel will transition back to the Senate, and the president of the Senate will serve as the chair of the LCC, with the speaker then serving as the vice chair. It also has the majority leaders from the House and Senate and the minority leaders of each of those bodies, as well as 2 members that are appointed by the majority leaders and 1 member appointed by the minority leader of each body. The LCC then, provides oversight and direction to all the joint offices and commissions, and it also establishes the complement of how many staff each of the offices and commissions will have, and we establish how those employees will be compensated, the levels at which they'll be compensated, and we coordinate the submission of the budgets to the legislature for consideration every 2 years, as well as establishing the insurance benefits that are provided to legislative employees. Some additional responsibilities that the office that I oversee is to coordinate and serve as a fiscal agent for the television broadcasting, closed captioning work that happens both for floor sessions as well as committee meetings of the legislature. Also, if somebody, excuse me, is requesting an accommodation, they have an accommodation due to a limitation or disability, those accommodations are coordinated through our office. We provide technical support and do a lot of the mapping related to redistricting, which we're coming up on that time period right now with the census data that'll be released a little bit later this summer. We develop fiscal notes on when there's legislation that impacts the legislature, and the legislature may have a cost associated with the implementation of that legislation. Our office coordinates the development of the fiscal notes. You saw the slide with all of those various commissions that were listed that we provide staffing for. And we also provide human resources and fiscal support services for the joint offices and commissions. And with respect to the councils, we serve as the entity that is responsible to work with the councils on the hiring and appointment and recruitment if there is a vacancy in the executive director position for the councils. We maintain a Minnesota Legacy website. And then there are also memberships that legislative members and staff, national organizations that we participate in, and we serve as the fiscal agent for those memberships. So our operating budget is about equivalent to the funding that's provided through the legislature, where we serve as a fiscal agent. More specific work that involves more in-depth staffing within the LCC is the Subcommittee on Employee Relations. That is the subcommittee under the jurisdiction of the Legislative Coordinating Commission that's responsible for the review of the labor contracts that the executive branch, that Minnesota Management and Budget negotiates. And the Subcommittee on Employee Relations does an interim review of those contracts that later are submitted to the full legislature for consideration of ratification. And we're the staff to that subcommittee. We also work with the Legislative Salary Council, which is the council that establishes, there was a constitutional amendment a few years back, and that constitutional amendment created a council that determines what legislator salaries will be. And then there's also a compensation council, which makes recommendations to the legislature and the governor on the salaries of constitutional officers, salary ranges for the heads of agencies, and salaries for judges. And those are considered recommendations from that council. They are required to have subsequent legislative action to be in effect. We also have the Data Practices Commission, which I indicated was reestablished this year during the special session. And we have dedicated resources and will have staffing to provide research to that commission. The Task Force on Human Services Background Study Eligibility, that is a time-limited new group that was created, but there were some resources for the Legislative Coordinating Commission to provide staffing and for the purposes of the objectives of that task force. And then we also have a subcommittee on water, and there is a full-time director that works within the Legislative Coordinating Commission to support the work of that subcommittee. The more specific role with respect to the Legislative Coordinating Commission and the councils are that, as I mentioned, we're responsible for the recruitment and hiring of the executive directors. The Subcommittee on Ethnic Councils under the LCC is the final group that reviews and determines the appointment of the director of the councils. The director, it's appointed by that subcommittee and serves at the pleasure of the LCC, but you as the council are responsible for the supervision of the director and working collaboratively with the director on the specific work that the council does and the work of the director. And then the director is an executive branch employee. So it's a bit unique in terms of the interaction that Linda has with respect to the legislature, the executive branch, and you as the council, and the executive branch being the governor. So it's a very unique way that the statute was established and was designed to have this sort of joint role together. I'm also here just mostly to provide assistance with various administrative items that may come up. I work to make sure that that the council conducts a performance review. That's one of the things that's indicated in the statute. I also track and provide any assistance that may be necessary with the submission of the annual report and the biennial budget that has to be presented to the legislature. And then sometimes there are just sensitive issues or issues associated with working specifically on behalf of the community, but yet also serving in a nonpartisan role. And so I'm here as a resource to help, whether it's Linda or you as council members, kind of sort through some of those issues that can become a little bit more complicated. I also work with the appointments people in the House and the Senate to work to get the membership, the 4 legislative members that are outlined in the statute to be members of the council, and generally here to be a liaison or help in any way that I can. So that's my overview. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Michelle? I know we're being filled with lots of information from everybody tonight.
I got a quick question, Michelle. And
Yeah.
I was just trying to understand. I know it sounds a little complex with the legislative and the executive. What's the history behind that? And also, maybe you can touch on, is this a practice all over? I mean, besides Minnesota?
So I am not aware of this structure existing in other places, but I have to say I also have not really done research on it. I can connect with the National Council of State Legislatures and see if they have any information about whether or not there are similar structures. My understanding is that the statute was rewritten a few years back, and that there was members of the legislature who worked to craft this unique interaction and kind of dual role that the council has in both advising the legislature and advising the governor. So that's kind of my understanding on the historical context of it, that it was rewritten a few years back to try to reflect that sort of dual role of working both on the executive branch side of things and the legislative branch side of things.
Other questions for Michelle?
I have a quick question. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can.
I'm having some issues with my audio. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the presentation, Michelle. That was really helpful and interesting to kind of hear all the different pieces around LCC and what they do. I know you'd mentioned that there is some work that you do around redistricting. Could you expand a little bit of more about that? Is that more like logistical support, or is it like I guess more hands-on? Just wondering, because I was involved in the census, and I think redistricting is such an important kind of piece that everyone should be involved in, and wanting to kind of understand more about the work or the role that you all have.
So within the Legislative Coordinating Commission, the office that I work within, we have a group of individuals that comprise the Geographic Information Services, GIS services for the legislature. And we do the mapping functionality. So we don't, we're not involved in policy per se. We're there to help and support House committees and Senate committees that work on redistricting, as well as the traditionally in the redistricting process, there's also a role for the courts sometimes. And so in that process, we assist more from a data standpoint as we work with the census data and work to develop what different maps might look like if different considerations were made with respect to redistricting. Then outside of the redistricting process, whenever there are new members elected and things like that, we create the geographic maps that display what is the district that a member represents. We also publish a variety of statistics that are associated more from a geographic standpoint when it comes to elections or things of that nature. So we've got a large plethora of information available on our website related to both redistricting and then just geo-mapping type things as well.
Got it. Thank you. So then the maps would be published, or I guess put together by you all, like kind of as the last step.
Yeah, both the House and the Senate also have, during the redistricting process, they have redistricting committees, and the different caucuses also have staff who have access to the data as well as the software, the technical software tool that allows you to do different sort of what if scenarios related to redistricting. And then we serve as a joint nonpartisan resource to that process as well.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Welcome.
And take myself back off mute. Any other questions for Michelle? Well, Michelle, thank you. I think that was very helpful. Oh, Linda, were you going to say something?
I had just put it in the chat, but I just wanted to hear a little bit about how legislative members are selected or appointed to the ethnic councils.
Sure. So within each of the 4 caucuses at the legislature, so the Subcommittee on Ethnic Councils that is created under the Legislative Coordinating Commission, in that resolution that's adopted by the Legislative Coordinating Commission, there are 4 members who serve on that. And it's designated to be the Speaker of the House, the Minority Leader of the House, the Majority Leader of the Senate, and the Minority Leader of the Senate, or their designates. So then those individuals designate if they want someone to serve on that subcommittee on their behalf. The membership for the councils, as well as the membership for that long slide that I showed of commissions, there are individuals who work with those leaders, and each statute has a different, might have a specific way in which members are appointed. So for example, with the ethnic councils, the Senate members go through what's called a subcommittee on committees. So, and that is a subcommittee of the Rules Committee within the Senate. So leadership identifies who the individuals are that they might want to bring to that subcommittee for that subcommittee to make that official appointment. In the House, it's the Speaker of the House and the Minority Leader who determine who the representation will be.
Did that answer the question, Linda, for you?
It did. Thank you, Michelle.
Any other questions for Michelle? All right. Well, thank you, Michelle. And Michelle's been instrumental in keeping us abreast of trying to get our legislative folks appointed to our council. So hopefully before this fiscal year is over, which we just began, that we will have a full house from the legislative side of things. So were there any comments, or did anybody sign up from the public side that wanted to say anything? Shakira, was there anybody that signed up?
I do not see anybody in the chat, nor do I see anybody on our Facebook page.
Okay. So we're going to move on to unfinished business with that. And look at, I got it, Ms. Shakira, you sent it to me. Here we go. I'm like, my paper. So one of the things that we talked about last month, and then we also wanted to reiterate it this month, is we wanted to be able to, when we started to have different commissioners or other agencies present, one of the things that we mentioned at the last council meeting was to say, how can we have not just the commissioners present, but also coincide that with some of the community-based organizations as well. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up and also share with you, we pretty much have identified the next few commissioners from August to the end of the calendar year. So for August, we're looking at having Commissioner Mueller, who's from the Department of Education, so MDE, and then also bringing back Commissioner Olson from OHE. We also looked at, for September, having Commissioner Herc from Veteran Affairs. We're trying to think about different areas that could still impact African heritage, but yet we may not have had them come and share. And Veteran Affairs, I mean, we have quite a few of our African heritage, excuse me, members that are actually a veteran. And so I think it's good to hear what's going on, what are they doing, how has it impacted, you know, our community, and then how can we dig in and partner with that group. In October, we're looking at Department of Disability Services. We haven't identified, you know, which arm of the disability services, but that's forthcoming information. In November, we're looking at having DNR, so Department of Natural Resources, come and present. And then December, we're looking at having Human Services come back. If you recall, we had her come originally, but we're looking at, you know, not only having Commissioner Harpstead, you know, the Assistant Commissioner of Children and Family Services, but possibly Tiki Brown and Dr. McKinney, the Chief Equity Officer, to also present. So as you all are hearing who's coming, and we can send this out via email to the council members, think about what communities, community organization or community members that could potentially present side by side with similar topics. Because I think that was one of the biggest things that we wanted to make sure is that it's not just hearing from the commissioners, but also how does that impact the community? So how do you pair those two together? Any questions about that?
Yeah, Madam Chair, this is Councilmember Nadi.
Yes.
On the month that the Veterans Affairs will be attending, can we connect with the Diversity Department in National Guard? They are trying to build relationship in our community, and they're open to attend the meetings and present and also connect with our people. So if we can pair them together, I think they serve a similar purpose.
No, I'm definitely okay with that. What I would say then is connect with Shakira. So if you have specific, you know, contacts, or is there somebody that specifically that you're looking at, definitely connect with Shakira. And so we can make sure that we can get them, you know, on the agenda.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments or questions?
Madam Chair, quick question, just so I understand. Are you saying that moving forward, we're going to pair our commissioner meetings with organizations coming in and presenting on similar topics in August, and then moving forward from there?
Yes. So if you remember, Biff, too, we had talked about proper English here. We talked about having more community speak towards what they're doing in reference to some of these issues and some of these concerns, and even some of the successes that we're having. So I just don't want this to be, you know, all deficit based, but there's some assets that are happening as well. And so if somebody is looking for how does this impact my community, then there can be a community member that can share, well, hey, here's what we're doing around, and I'll just say, you know, public safety as just an example, you know, or workforce development as another example. And we had asked, we had brought this up, I want to say in May, it was actually brought up in May and again last month. And we said, as we go into the new fiscal year, which as you all know, we're in the new fiscal year because the state fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th. And so we said, let's at least from, you know, from July to December, let's kind of do this pair and share type of thing so that it's not so agency heavy. And so the idea would be you would have a commissioner or an agency present, because it doesn't always have to be the commissioner, an agency present, and then also a community based organization to present or similar. to present on the same topic. All right, anything else on this one?
Hi, Madam Chair. This is Carl Crawford. I don't know how my audio is, but
We can hear you.
my question is to pair the Department of Education and this whole challenge of the critical race theory, and how as a council we can support making sure that real history is being taught to our kids and is not taken out of the schools. And I'll pause there.
Well, and you know what, Carl, I think that that brings up a good point to when we do have MDE and OHE here. That may be something to pose to them, because we do give them kind of a precursor to say, hey, here's what we want you to come in and ask or respond to, or you know, if they say, hey, here's what I want to be able to talk about. So I think that would be an excellent, you know, thing to bring up when they come, you know, next month, and inquire about that, but then also looking at it through inwardly to say, what is it that we can do so that we're making sure we put out a newsletter. So maybe in one of our newsletters, you know, we are breaking down the real history around CRT.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was late today because we actually have that organization that is having a meeting right now in Duluth as we speak, that is attacking our schools and their ability to teach real history.
Yeah.
So it's here. Thank you.
It is. And so you bring up a great point that we definitely need to be at the forefront of it and not, you know, not behind it. So yeah, I think, you know, Shakira or Linda, if you all can note that to make sure that that's one of the questions, you know, for conversation for the two commissioners for next month.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Council.
Yep. You are welcome. Any other, and you know what, Dr. Lawson, I just saw your Q&A, so I apologize about that. And I think it was as a result to, I'm assuming, I don't know if your question was basically in reference to what was presented, or you're just saying, you're just making a note. So I apologize about that. I just saw that came up.
I just want to add a point. Based on what Carl said, which I'm sure, you know, this is very interesting, that it's discussion need to be had. I think this is not just limited to asking the questions. So if there are other organizations who actually are advocating for that and they can be identified, that would be good to listen to them too as well, if we know of any.
Yeah, if we do know of any, I think that would be perfect to, you know, bring that up. I know I mentioned way back when, I don't know if everybody's in is still in existence, but that was something where Elder Mary Kay Boyd and Giovanni Ford were actually doing some work, you know, from the educational realm. So if that is still around, that, you know, those two may be good context to inquire about them, you know, coming and presenting alongside the two commissioners. Any other comments or questions? Okay, so we're going to move on to new business. So as you all recalled, when we had met with Tracy, and this is when we are around the time when we were trying to redo our bylaws, so to speak. And one of the questions that came up was that she highly recommended that we remove that language around sponsorships. And so she said the way to really look at you know, moving forward and allowing Linda and her team to really kind of do their day-to-day business, so to speak, is for us at the beginning of the fiscal year to approve the annual plan memo. The annual plan memo was sent out to everyone, and we do want to vote on that memo, but I also want to open it up for questions, but I'm going to turn it over to Linda, if she wants to give any further context to the annual plan memo before we call for a vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Shakira, if you can bring up the new document. And just in case you weren't at the meeting, the annual plan memo is really just an estimate of how we're going to spend our funding on non-state contracts. It's a pretty rigid document that cannot be amended. And so we have been counseled to make sure that the estimates that we put in are more on the high end. SMART the agency that manages our fiscal reporting. They audit all of our expenditures and ensure that we stay within the estimates within our categories. So the document that Shakira is now sharing, and one which you would have received via email, has been amended to reflect an upward estimate, just so that we can make sure we have some flexibility. So we've pretty much broken it down into 4 categories, and these are categories that they have used before. So public speaking and performer services would be one, and that's if we need to hire somebody, for example, Day on the Hill, we had to hire a performer, anybody who's kind of in more of a technical space. We have also allocated resources for training and professional services. It's really important that the staff is developed as well as the council. Just like we did the legislative training and media training, and those things are niceties, but they're more than niceties. Those are competencies that we as staff and council member need to have so that we can effectively do our work. Community outreach and ambassadors. As we begin to move more into the community and host listening sessions, we need monies to do workshops, rent facilities, we might have speakers. And so that we haven't had to spend as much this past year because of the pandemic, but going forward, and because we're in a biennium 2-year budget, we need to make sure that we have money estimated for that. And the last piece would be the design services and technical writing. What falls under this area is our annual report, and any place where we need to design, say, an ad or printed materials. So what we have done is said we're estimating 200 grand, and in these 4 different categories, again, this is on the high end, and we still have the flexibility within our financial reporting to move money around. But again, any monies that we spend are put into specific categories for non-contract work, and we have to stick within these items. And then also only one vendor can't receive more than $5,000 unless they're a targeted vendor, which puts them in a different category. Just so you know, anytime we have an expenditure, one of the first things that we try to do is look at the targeted list to make sure that we are actually using vendors from our African heritage community. That's key. So anytime we're spending money, that's where we're going first. And then after that, we will go outside of the group. So that is about it with this. It's just a document that just stays on file. And as I said, once these dollar values are in, we can't amend them. And they aren't just fluffy dollars in general. We did look at previous years to see what was spent in various categories. So that's about it for this. And as Madam Chair said, this is something that we will need to vote on per our new bylaws. We cannot move forward with any non-state contracts without having a memo in place.
Are there any questions before I ask for a vote? I will add, and this is more so, and Wayne knows this because we just met, the executive team met last week, and we did ask them to increase some of the areas. One of the things that we know that is in our strategic planning really is around that outreach. And so the numbers, were beefed up for that. So I appreciate you all looking at this through a critical lens. And then also just keeping in mind that what we're basically approving is saying that these are the amounts that they would spend. Contracts would not exceed $5,000. We would still know who they've contracted with, but it also allows them to move forward and not have to necessarily wait until the next council meeting, because sometimes there is a lag of time if they're going to contract with someone and they want to move expeditiously on the contract, there's usually a lag of time because of our timing of when we meet. And, again, just kind of reiterating, this was one of the reasons why we added it in the language for the bylaws. It was highly recommended. We did, consult with the finance agency to look at best practices. And this is actually what the other ethnic councils are also doing as well.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead. Yep, go ahead, Deep.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I'm not sure, I might have missed this, Linda, so I'm sorry in advance, but is it up to that amount then, like up to 25,000? So like if we don't use that full amount, there's not going to be an issue around that, correct? Or wouldn't just like...
No. Yes, these are just, this annual plan memo is really just to kind of help you with your planning and kind of keep you on track with where you're going to be spending. But no, if we don't spend $50,000, it's not going to be an issue at all. And in fact, most people do not spend up to their amounts because they know that they're setting it a little bit higher because this is, like I said, you can't amend it. It's unamendable.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion, excuse me, a motion to approve the annual plan memo. Sorry, you all.
Well, I'll make.
I will say, did I hear Carl say so moved?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Is there a second?
A second.
Who seconded?
Wanda Adams Lee.
Okay, thank you. And Shakir, if you can call for a roll call vote and vote aye or nay.
Okay. Chair Hughes.
Aye.
Vice Chair Joe.
Aye.
Secretary Mullins.
Aye.
Councilmember Busa.
Aye.
Councilmember Crawford.
Aye.
Councilmember Nandi.
Aye.
Councilmember Adams Lee.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Motion carries. The events for FY22. Linda, is that you as well? I think you're the rest of the meeting.
I believe that was just in reference to how we were going to conduct events for the rest of the year. And at this juncture, everything will still be virtual, but I think in November, we will start with having our policy summit actually be in person if the Capitol is open. And so that's pretty much what we were saying with that. And then as we move forward, we will be looking to see what other events we want to put on the calendar. But I think that that's what it related to. And I think also you had mentioned that the council meetings would still be virtual throughout the rest of this year. And then we would move to an in-person format starting in the next year.
Correct. And so I just want to remind, council members, and then also, for the new council members, and let me back up. I so apologize because it just dawned on me. This is Yolanda Adams Lee's first full council meeting. She was newly appointed, so welcome. And then we also had a reappointment of Biftu Busa. And I meant to mention it as soon as she jumped on, but I think we were right in the middle of presentations. So charge it to my hand and not to my heart. But just wanted to welcome her because this is the first official meeting. She did come on the training, but as far as the full, fledged council meeting, so definitely welcome Yolanda to to the council, and then re-welcoming Biftu to this. But so. Yeah, absolutely. So we had mentioned a while back that when the pandemic somewhat subsided and the state started to open, I think we had all agreed that for the calendar year, we would just remain virtual. And part of that was because we didn't know what was going to happen. This was right around the time the governor had said, if, we have 77%, folks that are vaccinated, then he'll slowly but surely open it up. And we said, to avoid the woulda, coulda, shoulda, let's just, agree that if everybody is comfortable, we will continue for the remainder of the calendar year, which would be December, to conduct our meetings in this modality. However, that does not necessarily discount that as we look at fall and going into, the actual, calendar year of 2022, we could potentially have some face-to-face events. But as far as the council meetings are concerned, we will continue with this modality. And so that's really what that bullet point was. And Linda did allude to it as well. But I wanted to just kind of remind you all, so that all of a sudden, if you see something that says, hey, the council is, putting on this event, and you see it's face to face, I don't want folks to get confused with what we had stated for the actual meetings that we had agreed to do. I unfortunately did not do good calendaring, so I do have another event, but I'm going to turn this over to Vice Chair Doe for the remainder of the meeting. But what's left literally is just updates from council staff, and then any announcements, and then adjournment. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wayne, and then Wayne can turn it over to Linda.
Wow, just like that. Okay. Okay, I take that responsibility. Okay, so let's continue again. Welcome Beef 2 back on the council, and then Yolanda, definitely. Okay, Linda, you can go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would also like to say welcome to Yolanda. And then also, I'm just so excited to have you back with us. We were in there lobbying for you because we believe that you're a good council member, and excited to have you back, and look forward to working with you again. And then also working with Yolanda, Council Member Yolanda, and Council Member Beef too. Great. So I'm just going to give a very brief report, Executive Director's report. We spent a lot of last month really just preparing for the shutdown. As you know, the budget was not signed, and we had to go into a special session. And all during that time, we had to prepare for the fact that maybe June 30th, the state would shut down, which would mean that our office would shut down. And in order to continue with operations, there were certain things that needed to be done. I want to give a special recognition to Shakira, who worked a lot with those details, as well as some of the COVID details. So spent a lot of time with that. And then just from the administration side, budget fiscal year end, work with that, the new budget, the American Rescue Plan funds, had quite a few meetings on that. And then also we're looking at some of the job descriptions for our people. In particular, we were looking at the outreach coordinator's position, trying to see, does that position really reflect the duties of the position? In addition, they are looking at the executive director's description, and that's from all of the councils. This was work that had been started. So I've been engaged in some of those meetings. From an outreach perspective, I had some presentations, and really have started doing more community work since we were in special session. So met with Urban League President, ALF President, Nas, and so forth, and just trying to build those coalitions while we are out of session. Also spent some time actually listening to the special sessions and trying to figure out what's going on, what bills are going to be passed. And Theo will talk a lot more about that. The big change for the council, though, is that Amber, as you know, has been on leave with the governor's office, and she was offered a position and she accepted it. So very excited for her, because I think it's an amazing opportunity. And I heard wonderful things about the work. In fact, I was told that they could not have gotten through the special session without her contribution. So that looks favorably, definitely on her, but then also on the council and the work that we're doing here, because she is one of us. So excited for her, but of course, a little bummed that she is gone, because she is an amazing colleague. And so you will see that position posted fairly soon. They have opened up the job posting, so it's not posted yet, but the hiring freeze is off, and so you'll see that posted soon. So that's pretty much it from an executive directors and outreach perspective. That's what we have been doing in that space. So I'm going to throw it over to Theo to talk about what's happening on the legislative end.
All right, thank you, Linda. And good evening, everybody. So for the legislative report today, I'll just focus on high-level overview of the June 2021 special session. And just a quick mention before that, we're working on a legislative debrief event for August. So each year, CMAH invites legislators to reflect on what happened during the legislative seasons, whether it be regular sessions and special sessions, and to discuss their main takeaways at a community gathering. So this year we're holding a virtual event on August 12th, and we would like council members to be present and to participate in that event. So be on the lookout for communications from us about the legislative debrief program. So in terms of the first special session of 2021, it was successful. So that's a big victory for the governor and for the two legislative bodies. They should be all commended because it was not an easy task to accomplish that goal of passing the state budget and a bipartisan budget. We have the unique situation where Minnesota is the only state in the country that has a divided legislative body. The Republicans control the Senate and the Democrats control the House. And everybody was able to come together in the negotiation process and actually pass, I believe, 13 budget bills, I think it was, and actually get the governor to sign that by the end of June. So that was great. The main takeaways, I will try to be just high level with regards to some of the takeaways, because we're going to be delving further into the stuff with the, throughout the coming weeks here with the debrief event. On education, the education budget includes $1.2 billion in new investments, and this includes funding that we definitely were part of the push for early childhood education, English learner services, special education, and very importantly, initiatives to increase teachers of color and Indigenous teachers in the state. The bill also has provisions for implementation of ethnic studies and training to improve understanding of non-exclusionary disciplinary measures in schools. Really the key thing there that the Black community and other communities of color have been pushing for is ways to institute discipline, but then not detach students from formal education, or provide them a lesser education based on the discipline. So that those types of matters of equity in the classroom, and equal treatment in the classroom, and really, the really difficult challenge that we all have as a country here, and particularly Minnesota has of really having excellent education access, no matter your place or your race. Those challenges, I think the budget that was passed, it has key things in there that are trying to address that major problem. On the health and human services, the bill, it expands medical assistance for coverage for new moms. and it increases access to childcare, and also has reforms. It reforms the personal care assistance program pay rates, which is, I think, the advocates say that that's long overdue. Such an important program in the state. Also very happy to report that the bill, the HHS bill, includes funding and policy support to improve maternal health for Black and Indigenous and other moms of color. So that's a key challenge that particularly Black women and children face. The bill that CMAH has been supporting for some years now is called the Dignity in Pregnancy and Childbirth Act. And that bill, language from that bill, is included in the Health and Human Services budget. On jobs and labor, some major proposals to prioritize BIPOC communities in the delivery of workforce development services that we have been pushing in concert with community partners. Some of the major proposals there, supported by DEED and all, were removed from the jobs labor bill. And another key thing I should mention, the final bill does not include the paid family and medical leave benefit insurance program that the House had passed, but the budget contains $70 million in COVID relief grants for small businesses, including $10 million for minority-owned businesses, and that is there's some measures there, some funding measures there that would have direct impact to communities, and there's also a key provision in the bill, $80 million for economic revitalization in areas that have the greatest needs during the past year. And so that is some provisions for or some implications for addressing community redevelopment and reconstruction with respect to damages done during the civil unrest of last year, and then more generally the pandemic and the economic health crisis that have impacted our communities. So there's a lot of pluses and minuses in the jobs bill, but there's still a lot of work to do there as well. And finally, I would the main focus, or at least the relatively higher focus that we've had during these past 6 months, has been the public safety and policing measures. And so the public safety budget includes funding for justice and policing reforms, and also community-based violence prevention programs. The main takeaway, I think, from all involved, across partisan lines, maybe for different reasons, and certainly for the BIPOC communities and for African Heritage community organizations that are involved in this work, is that the reforms are inadequate. When it comes down to it, the reforms were inadequate that were the final bill, and there's a lot of work to do. But the bill contains data collection reform, which is a very important police and reform policy proposal. It contains regulations of no-knock warrants, sign and release warrants, provision to establish a task force on missing and murdered African American women. And there are several other provisions that we've supported, and there are several other provisions in it that we fully supported along several ways during the past 6 months. But there are several police accountability proposals that are missing from the bill, including very important civilian oversight councils, the support for that, a bipartisan measure that would be the duty to report excess force, a measure to end pretextual stops. And some of these are directly related to, to very recent incidents. The issue of pretextual stops is it became very significant and relevant to public discussion following the killing of Dante Wright. The key community concern with ending qualified immunity, and also the requirements to release body cam footage to families after their loss. So those measures and some others, but those particular ones there are some common sense policing reform proposals that were removed from the final public safety budget. So I will end it there. If there are any questions or anything that you guys want to discuss, I definitely welcome it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Theo. Yeah, Jude, just before you come in, definitely, I just want to open that up for some questions, either for Theo or Linda. That would be great. Go ahead, Jude.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Theo, for the presentation. Can we have a highlight of that? It's really important to have some of those numbers and highlights when we talk to our people, showing them what the budget is all about and some of the key things that we may have interest or even aspirations about.
Certainly. So in terms of the update I just gave you want the notes that I just gave you, or
yeah,
or the highlights about the budget bills?
Which, yeah, it's the same thing. So about the budget, yeah.
Definitely. I will get that to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair, this is Carl Crawford. Theo, thank you for your report. When are they going to relook at the definition of minority-owned businesses? Here in northern Minnesota, we've had a couple of white women who are wives of construction companies that are able to qualify as minority-owned businesses, when in fact that clause is not fitting the need of what we really need to close the gap in economics here. Have they talked about relooking at that definition? And I'll pause there.
All right, thank you, Carl, for that question. I mean, I think it's an important question. I am not familiar with the present discussions around that. If there are some, I'm just not familiar with it right now. But I mean, my understanding is that some of there's federal aspects to these statutory definitions, and then there's also the state aspects to it. So I mean, specifically like with MNDOT, for instance, there's disadvantaged business enterprises, I think, include various categories, including women. So I don't know. I mean, it will be interesting. I would love to hear how you think it should be changed. I mean, do you think that there should be an economic component to how the categories are how the classifications that are formulated?
Yes, I would love to chat offline, because they showed us as having a number of minority-owned businesses in Duluth, and when we looked those up, those were not minority-owned businesses. Some of the companies had switched their spouses' names so that they could qualify for grants that were earmarked for diverse groups of people, and the money isn't getting where it needs to go. And it's completely legal because it hides behind the definition. And I won't take up any more time with the council, but love to have another offline conversation with you.
Okay. That's really important.
Yeah, I can have some ideas on that. So the DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, it was federal legislation, I think 1982. And that is the most governing ruling when it comes to minority-owned businesses. And by then, women women were marginalized a lot in the country. So they become part of it. And up to now, that's the most important certification that you can have as minority-owned businesses. Here in the state is, or even at county level or city level, they are trying to do something on their own, because once you talk about minority-owned businesses, you put white women, and as you said, Carl, they just switched name. I know one company, you know, both of them were, the man was on construction, and then they just had, because it's if you have 51% share as a woman, it becomes minority-owned, women-owned, and then within 3-5 years, they were making more than $20 million on revenue. Because they have the experience, it's all white, but just switching the name. So that's a big problem. And I think it's more of grassroots at this level, what we can do to push at local level, at state level, where we have some leverage. Then at national level, it requires more fight, because at that level, for instance, MNDOT, when they do a project, once there's federal allocation to it, like Highway 252, then it kicks out the state incentives for BIPOC community, because there's a federal allocation, and then the federal law prevails, which recognizes white women as minority. So it was one of the discussions we were having 2 years before pandemic, and it's still there, because all the things that the MNDOT wanted to do, it just once federal government, and then it was Trump administration, they were very hostile. So they didn't allow MNDOT to do. So it's really critical conversation that we can have some other times, but it has, it impacts us a lot. I remember there was a data I was looking at, I think it was 2016. So for MNDOT projects, they quantified how they supported minority. So for Black-owned businesses, it was $1.5 million for the year. For Latino businesses, $2.5 million. Asian businesses, $11 million, and white women, $49 million. So it was so horrible that the state started to do something. There's improvement after, from I think it was 2016, 5 years ago. So there's improvement, but up to now is a huge problem. So the discussion from the administration, Department of Administration, PTAC, MNDOT, and then down to counties and local government is just something that is huge. So
okay, great. Thank you, Councilmember Jude. That's great information. And that's a conversation definitely we need to go through, because that $10 million for minority business really have to be defined in how that's going to be allocated. Any other questions for Theo? Theo, is there anything else? There was a training that went on. I thought it was very, very impactful. I don't know if you want to just mention something about that.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, we had a legislative training with former Senator Hayden, Jeff Hayden, and that took place a few Saturdays ago, a couple of Saturdays ago, and it was it was very successful. It was a really good overview of the legislative process, and also we got into how communities can be engaged in the process. Really good response from the former senator about how to get engaged, and I think it's something actually that in terms of engagement with him and the council's relationship with him, that he wants to continue, and that we will be continuing moving forward. A very important resource for the community.
Great, yes, and I believe the PowerPoint presentation was sent out to all council members to take a look at it if you didn't attend. But thank you so much. If there's no other question for Theo, then we will go Shakira.
Okay, so the update that I have is just regarding the oral history project. As you know, the funds for that did roll over into fiscal year 22. But as an update, in addition to that, we did file for a grant extension, so then that way we would have longer to work on the project. Before the grant extension, it was scheduled to be done on October, We got the grant extension, so now it will be able. So now we'll be able to work on the project until June of 2022. Any questions?
Yes, any question from council members? Okay, well, hearing none, one thing that I want to point out here also, and we talked about in executive committee meeting, we still have an opening for the secretary to join the executive council of executive members. So we will have to vote on that in our next meeting. So if you're interested, please forward your name to Shakira so we can have that and be able to call for a vote to have a secretary going forward. Any questions on that? Okay. Are there any announcements anyone has to share with us? Let me start. I'm a part of a magazine called Voices Magazine. And the goal of Voices Magazine is to empower people of African heritage, and that magazine will be coming out with their summer edition actually in a couple of weeks. So I want to encourage you to get a copy of it because we really want to highlight the stories of people of African heritage here in Minnesota. So feel free, if you don't, just go to Voices Magazine, you'll be able to pull it up and we can send you a copy. It's actually free, and we'll be able to distribute that to any members who will be interested in that. Any other announcements?
This is Jude.
Yes.
My company, Pioneer Consulting, we are proposing to the City of Brooklyn Center to build an innovation hub in the city. We know what happened with the killing of Dante Wright, and also COVID-19 impacted that city more than most neighboring cities around in Twin Cities. So there are so many challenges the city is facing, and the innovation hub will focus primarily on micro business support and high-level workforce development and some other things that can help people to create wealth and also improve their income. So it's just something I wanted to share. We'll be meeting with the city 2 weeks from now, and hopefully, if it goes well, something I would like CMAH to collaborate because it's going to help, especially people of African heritage who live in these northwest suburb areas who need all kinds of support in terms of capacity building, workforce development, micro business support, technical support, and all kinds of things that can help us to improve the well-being of our people and start closing the wealth gap. Just wanted to share. It's just something we'll be working on for a while.
Great. Thank you so much for that information. Any other announcements? Okay, well, we're at the end of our meeting, of course, within the time frame. Again, I just want to reiterate what's been happening in last year and the efforts and work of the team to pull everything together. Linda on board, Shakira, Theo, and now we have Femi also. And all of the work that we've done as a council, just to make sure we can go through the year, I think it was phenomenal. And looking forward to what we're going to do. It's a challenge to all of us to just redouble our effort in how we're going to look at CMAH moving forward in the next couple of years with the kind of work that's before us. So I just want to thank all of you for the work that you're doing. Let's continue to do that. It's very important, and the impact it has on our community is huge, and we should just continue to be focused. I'm sure we'll be able to achieve our goals and our objectives. With that being said, can I get a motion for adjournment?
I move a motion to adjourn for the meeting.
All right. And a second?
Second by Crawford.
Second by Crawford. This doesn't have to go to a vote, okay, parliamentary. We can just call the meeting adjourned. So thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you next month.
Thank you. Stay well.
Thank you.
Thank
Stay
you.
well.
Bye,
Good
everyone.
night.
Bye, everyone.